System of a Down, the album, John ruined
the album.
for me.
We are covering the debut album from System of a Down. We haven't covered them on the show in almost 4 years. We last covered them on episode 4 or 5, one of those two. And now we are here on episode 58, finally covering them again. And we did them on episode 5, January 7th, 2020. So it's been over 4 years since we have covered System of a Down on this program. Their self-titled album came out on June 30th, 1998. It was released on Rick Rubin's American label, which at the time was a subsidiary of Columbia. He was just getting American started. System of a Down was actually one of the first bands that Rick Rubin signed, and he has described System of a Down as his favorite band in the world, and that he was nervous to sign them because he didn't think people would like them, and he didn't want to be the guy that like tried to make them and couldn't make them. But obviously, as we know, System of a Down ends up becoming one of the largest groups of this era. So yeah, this album came out June 30th, 1998, and it did very well. It has since gone 2 times platinum in the United States. It is also platinum in Brazil, gold in Canada, Italy, and the United Kingdom. It peaked at number 1 on the Heat Seekers chart back in 1998 and at number 124 on the Billboard 200. It also recharted in 2018 for some reason, and it made it to number 9 on the Alternative Albums chart, number 7 on the Hard Rock Albums chart. Maybe was that when they announced they were breaking up or going on hiatus? I can't figure out why this album would continue to chart, but apparently it has. The 2 singles that came out from this album were Sugar and Spiders. Both of them did decently well on the mainstream rock and modern rock tracks chart. Sugar peaking at number 28, Spiders peaking at number 25. The single for Sugar has also gone platinum, selling over 1 million copies. And it's kind of strange because the single didn't really offer anything other than the song and a couple live versions of the songs from this record. But yeah, certainly a huge record for System of a Down. Spiders was featured on the Scream 3 soundtrack and in the film. It's also in Rock Band 4. Yeah, this really launched System of a Down into the main group of new metal bands. They played the Ozfest second stage and then graduated to the main stage before Toxicity came out. They did a run of shows opening for Slayer. Yeah, a massive album for them and for the time period. Bryan, very curious because 1998, you are definitely still in your new metal mode. How were you taking System of a Down in 1998? Was this a big record for you at the time?
I can actually think about this a little bit earlier today, and I think like no, this is very weird. I'm gonna start this off just by saying like I think these albums this and Toxicity were released in the wrong order for me. You know what I mean?
Right.
If Toxicity came out first instead of this album, I think that like I don't know. It just feels like so. I wrote it like this: the 2003, 2004 Bryan likes this album more, and 1998 to 2002 Bryan likes Toxicity more. You know, like I think like Toxicity is a tighter album, but like when I was in my more proggy phase in 2003, 2004, I didn't give this album a chance. Like I never bought this. And it's really weird. Like I don't think I think the first System of a Down song that I really liked was Chop Suey. Yeah. And then I went back and I heard Spiders, which I think is actually my favorite System of a Down song, period. I just fucking love that song.
Yeah, great song.
But like, I think that like, I don't think that I would have ever liked this in 1998. It just isn't like what I was into. It's a little bit weirder than Toxic. I think it's actually a lot weirder than Toxicity.
It is, definitely, yeah.
And just at that version of me at that time, it was not looking for goofy, quirky, and weird. You know what I mean?
Right. I'm just curious because, like, you know, we've obviously talked on the show a lot about that time period for you and how you were just eating up anything that was new metal at the time, because there really weren't that many new metal bands. So I'm surprised, like, I'm curious, can you remember like why this wouldn't have been on your radar? Because I would assume, as someone who's listening to Korn and Limp Bizkit and Deftones, you know, you would have been aware of System like right when this came out. Right?
Oh, I was.
So, yeah. So why,
100%.
like, what was it that you never, like, if you were desperate for this kind of music? I know it's weird, but it's not so much weirder that you
I think it is.
You do, yeah.
I do. I think me and my friends, I remember me and my friends hearing Sugar the first few times and just being like, what a stupid fucking song. Like, we were so mad at that song.
Kombucha, mushroom, pea.
It wasn't that. It was Sugar. And we would just sit across from each other and be like, Sugar, stupid. You know what I mean? Like, we all hated it. None of us liked Sugar. Spiders, maybe. But, you know, if I'm remembering correctly, I liked Spiders at the time, but would not tell anybody because I didn't want people to think I liked System of a Down at the time. I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's a bunch of other people. I don't think that this music really spoke to 18-year-olds in Groveport, Ohio, the way that maybe as I got a little bit older, I was way more willing to go on a ride. But this album came out on a time where I don't want to go for a fucking ride, man. I just want to fucking hear some new metal.
You want riffs.
I don't want peephole. Boom, 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 boom. Like circus sound of music.
Circus music, yeah.
Just
even Sugar is so weird when you like, the part where they're like, Sugar, and then the guitar is very odd. It's like boop, boop.
Yeah.
Boop, 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 boop. Like it is very circusy. Like even that song is very circusy without being exactly the Jack in the Box circus type beat.
I think that the people that gravitated to, and I was telling you this on text yesterday, there were like a couple of types of people that kind of gravitated towards this. And one, for lack of a better term, it would be like hipper people that heard it and was like, oh, this is different and cool. And, you know, I'm going to be out ahead on a trend in a way where like they saw it coming and like wanted to be part of it. But I also think, and this is very, I don't know if I think that them coming out and being marketed as sort of the new Rage Against the Machine bought them a shitload of fans that they wouldn't have had if the political stuff hadn't, because it's not that political, this album.
No, it's not.
It's like one or two songs where you're like, I think Sugar is one that's
it's
like
kind of about drug use, I believe. Sugar. It's kind of about like addiction, substance abuse. But yeah, like Pluck is pretty political. There's a few songs on here that are, but yeah, it's not. It's definitely, there's no prison song on here. There's nothing that immediately jumps out at you as like, oh, this is a political, like this is a very political song. And that's the thing. Every Rage Against the Machine song is political. Oh, absolutely.
And I'm not saying that that's why I didn't like it at the time, because I wasn't sort of, I didn't identify as anything really politically, but I do think that like I remember saying like, I don't know what the fuck they're saying, like with Rage Against the Machine. I don't know what the fuck they're singing about. I don't care. It just fucking rocks. Yeah. You know what I mean? So maybe this didn't speak to me in that same way because I had believed it was Rage Against the Machine like.
It doesn't sound anything like Rage Against the Machine.
But it was marketed.
Yeah. Oh, like yeah. I just mean like if you, it's very like if someone was like, yeah, I love Rage and I hate System of a Down, I would be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like,
Yeah,
you could easily imagine someone liking one of these two bands and not liking the other one.
Yeah.
They're not occupying the same space in my mind.
Oh yeah. No, I wouldn't even call them close to the same music, but I do think that System of a Down kind of rode that wave.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Of people being like, hey,
100%.
this is, and like, I don't know, like that wasn't a selling point to me at that time either.
Right.
You know?
I think like obviously too, it is, one thing that you can talk about is I think that in terms of getting the political band label, I think a lot of that just had to do with the fact that they were Armenian as well, right? So it's like, I think journalists and people who were listening to this, the music is deeply fucking weird. Serge doesn't sound like anyone in this genre as far as like vocals. Like it's crazy. And then you add on the fact that it's 4 Armenian guys who have a couple political songs. And it's just like, if you're a reviewer that's reviewing 10 albums a week every week, when something comes along like this and there's a narrative attached to it, where it's like, oh, we got 4 Armenian guys, they got a few songs about the Armenian genocide and about politics, then it's like, oh, okay, these guys are a political band and that's something I can write about. Whereas, yeah, like if you sit and listen to this album, it's not very political. And we're obviously going to get to the articles much later, but it is one of those where it's one of those things where we read all these articles where all these bands are trying to distance themselves from being nu metal. And like one thing that System of a Down seems to be doing in these interviews is kind of distancing themselves from being political.
And Armenian, and even Armenian, in a way.
Yeah, like they're kind of saying like, I'll just skip ahead because there is one quote here from Darren that I think kind of sums it up. This is from an interview that he did with his old high school, which was an Armenian high school. And it says, Malakian is especially irritated by people who want to categorize System's brand of music. Quote, we are not an Armenian band. We are not a heavy metal band. And we aren't nu metal. We are System of a Down. People always seem to feel the need to put us into a category, but we just don't fit into any category. We are what rock music has evolved into. The category that gets the loudest response from Malakian is that System is a political band. Quote, anyone who would say that hasn't listened to too many of our songs.
Right.
So they don't want you to think of them as like Rage, as like a strictly political band.
Because it ties you down to, again, every Rage Against the Machine song is political. You know what I mean? Like, so it ties you into to kind of doing that to satisfy people. But I do think that after listening to this and Toxicity, and I haven't listened to Mesmerize and Hypnotize in a long time, but I do remember them. I think they get mileage out of it in a way.
Oh, yeah.
In a way that, like, I don't know if I think these albums are like great. You know what I mean? And I think that maybe one, they get the well, I loved this when I was younger and I haven't listened to it in a very long time.
Yeah.
They get that. One.
Yeah, where people just go, Toxicity is a great album. And I'm like, okay, when was the last time you listened to it?
Yeah. Yeah, there's that. And also just it is, I mean, here's the thing. There are not a lot of sort of leftist heavy metal bands. No. You know what I mean? So you got to grab on to the ones that exist. And I think that there are a lot of people who maybe give these albums a lot of leeway because they agree with some of the stuff they're saying. Although I will say the way their drummer is makes me feel like they're definitely not like super leftist, that they have their own, like, I think they have their own sort of almost mystical way of thinking that it's hard to read. Yeah, of course, the prison system is bad. So we could do a song that's explicitly about that. But a lot of times, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about, And it's not as clear. And maybe it's unfair to them. but I think there are a lot of people who sort of just, because they agree with this, they are like, this is really good. And like I said, this album, I don't know if I like it more than Toxicity. I think it's kind of tied with Toxicity for me, but there's a lot of stuff I don't like on this.
Oh yeah, same. I'll get into that in a minute, but I just wanted to say too, like, I think one thing that also comes up, at least for me, is that, you know, I also think there were a subset of people who were embarrassed to like nu metal, right? Like, I think, you know, it was kind of an embarrassing type of music, and I think, you know, you growing up in Groveport, you know, you had lots of friends that listened to it. Totally different thing than where I grew up, where nobody listened to it. And I was in the gifted program, and I was like, I didn't want people to know that I liked Korn. And System occupies that weird space where there are definitely people who listen to System in a snobby way, like in
they're
an
the
elevated
second
way.
Deftones.
Yeah, like with that, but also with Rage too, I think, right? It's like people wanted to say like, yeah, well, I listen, you know, nu metal kind of sucks, but like Rage Against the Machine is fucking cool because, like, you know, they're writing songs about freeing Tibet and race riots and stuff like that. So there's like almost this intellectual, there's almost this subset of nu metal fan that's like an intellectual snobby person who wants to be snobby. And System gives you so much of that to latch on to, both in that they're vaguely political. So there's that. It's like, well, they're smarter than Korn. You know, Korn's writing songs about like doing drugs and fucking and whatever. System of a Down's doing songs about Armenian genocide and, you know, and like drug addiction. They're actually saying drugs are bad, and I think that's fucking cool. Ooh. You know, so there is that cachet. I think that people wanted to excuse themselves for listening to this music, and System made it easy for them to do that. And the music itself does too. Like, the music itself is complicated and it is not very accessible. Like, some of these songs are deeply strange. And then there's no pop elements to them at all. And so I think there's also that too, of people going like, oh, you like Korn. Yeah, they wrote Freak on a Leash, and that's played on Total Request Live. I'm fucking listening to Qbert, dude. And you know, that's where that's what real like smart music people are listening to. And I remember there was one kid that I was you know, in an accelerated program with in high school who was like that. Like, I remember when Toxicity came out, he was like a snob for this album. Like, he was like, oh, Toxicity is like System of a Down went pop, man. Like, they did for sure. But it's like, you got to listen to their first album. Like, that's the real, you know, Sugar and Sweet Pea. And like, those songs are messed up, dude. Like, that's the real System of, you think you like System of a Down because Chop Suey's on the radio? Like, get fucked. Like, Sugar, that's where the real System of a Down is happening, you know?
Chop Suey blew people's fucking minds. Like, that song blew me the fuck away, man. Because as a guy who was like, Spiders is good, you know? Yeah. But, you know, that's not going to get me to buy an album or listen to an album. Hearing Chop Suey, like that song was, you can't undersell how much of a hit that fucking thing was. Like, everybody was listening to it.
Oh yeah,
at the time. But like, that was a poppier version of what they do, which then made it easier for guys like me to be like, oh yeah, it's like the Rage Against the Machine thing. Maybe I don't agree with their politics, but which I probably, who knows at the time what I thought their politics were. You know what I mean? Like,
it's hard to engage. It's hard to meet Rage and System on their level when you're like 15 and you just like live in a suburb and everyone you know is white, and like, it's hard to engage. I think with it at the time. At least it was for me.
I think it was for a lot of the people around me were just like, you know, with like working class hillbilly guys that like to rock, you know, because I was posting about this the other day. I've been watching this show, Outer Range, with Josh Brolin, and there is a family of sort of rural kind of hillbilly guys, and every time they show them, they're listening to like Every Rose Has Its Thorn and like stuff like that. They're not listening to George Jones. And something that I think gets undersold is that like working class white people generally don't listen to country music. They generally listen to like rock, metal, or rap. That's all the people I grew up with were. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
same.
Like everybody in my neighborhood was into Master P. And then Rage Against the Machine was a band that everybody liked. They didn't understand what they knew. You knew that they were political, but you maybe didn't know what the fuck they were ever talking about or what they believe, or if it matches with your incoherent political beliefs. And this is another band that came out where it was okay to be like, hey, this fucking rocks. And it has a message, but I don't know what the fucking message is. I just like that it rocks.
Well, I think for me anyway, I think the kind of the one difference, and maybe this is why, you know, System got maybe arguably bigger than Rage, or at least, you know, close enough, is like System's politics were always somewhat vague. It was more of just like a general capitalism is bad, mass incarceration is bad, George W. Bush is bad. But it wasn't, you know, like Rage Against the Machine would write an entire song about like one event that happened at one time. Like the whole song would be like, yeah, back in 1987, this guy did this and this guy. And then you're like, I don't know what that is. I don't know where Tibet is. I don't know, you know, like it was Rage Against the Machine was specific in a way where you just kind of like either ignored the politics or you didn't understand. And System was just like, the government's kind of bad. And you're like, you know what? The government is bad. That's fuck yeah. I agree, System of a Down. You're right. Why don't presidents fight the war? Good point. Why don't presidents fight the war?
It is good. And it's more obvious and I don't know. It's way more commercial version of what of what Rage Against the Machine was doing, maybe. But this band, by all rights, shouldn't have ever hit. You know what I mean?
It makes no sense that System of a Down is popular to me.
Like it feels like
I don't mind. I like them and I like a lot of their songs, but it makes no sense.
It feels like we lived in a completely different planet when these songs were huge fucking hits. And like, as much as there's stuff I don't like, I respect the fuck out of somebody that put out an album like this as their first album and then just go tour on it for fucking years until it hits. You know what I mean?
100%.
I think that's why Toxicity is good, is because, you know, they did this album, they toured on it, maybe enough to get sick of it. Maybe it's like I when somebody asked me for advice about podcasting, about getting started and what to do, I always tell them that they should get in front of an audience and, you know, go to an open mic, try stand up, and go in front of those people and see what works, and then start the podcast.
Yeah.
Knowing what works to an audience. You know what I mean? And I think that's what happened with System of a Down, is like they made this album, they went out and toured on it for like 3 or 4 years or 2 years. And like when they got back in the studio to write the songs, they knew exactly what they had to write, because they knew what people responded to from them. And I think that's what made them kind of a better, that's why and people could disagree with me, but that's why I think Toxicity is maybe a little bit better of an album than this, is because some of the stuff that I don't like on this got shaken out when Toxicity came out.
I think so for sure. And I think too, like they, you know, in the interviews, they talk a lot about, you know, Darren writes most of the songs, so it's mostly him that's talking about it. But, you know, him and Serge were in a band before System called Soil. And, you know,
I want to hear that. That's one of my notes, John.
The songs, The songs were very long, apparently, and very incoherent. And it's in actually, it's I think a Guitar World interview. Yeah, guitar.com with Darren. And they basically said, they asked him what changed between Soil and System. And he said, after Soil, I got into the Beatles. I never was into them before. Before that, I was just a metalhead. But the Beatles made me realize that song structure, putting things into 3 minutes, compress these things, maybe take some things out, which as a songwriter, I think is the hardest thing in the world. It's easy to keep throwing ideas in because you love all your ideas. But to make the song great, you got to sometimes pull things out. And that's the hardest part. What part of the song do you pull out to make it great? That's the biggest challenge. And I think that just kind of folds into exactly what you're saying. Is like, between Soil and System, they kind of figured out like, we got to make shorter songs and we got to be a little more cohesive. But then like on this record, a lot of these songs are wildly different from each other. Like it seems like every song is almost a different idea. And then they went, okay, people like Sugar and Sweet Pea and Spiders. Let's go make a whole album of those songs. Like it almost seems like over the course of, the 8 years or so between Soil forming and Toxicity coming out, it's like they kept figuring out, like distilling what makes our band good. What do people like about our band? And then they went in that direction. And then Mesmerize and Hypnotize are kind of on their own planet. We'll cover that whenever we cover those albums. But yeah, I think up to Toxicity, yeah, you're right. It's like a clear progression of giving the people what they want, I guess I would say.
Which is not, and this comes up in one of the articles too, and I think it's always important to bring up, that's not selling out. That is making, like a lot of people get that confused. It's not selling out. It's making music that the people that listen to you want. It's delivering on a promise that you should deliver as any kind of an artist. Like you should deliver what people expect from you. And like that's what these guys did. They figured it out, they distilled it all down, and they got it. They fucking it's really incredible actually, like to listen to these albums, like especially this and then Toxicity, I think is super like interesting in that like it very much is a band that found itself in between albums. And I love that shit. I love, like David Bowie does that a lot in his career, where like one album sounds one way and then the next one is like, what the fuck is that? And you're like, oh, I don't know about that. But then you're like, but the next album was great. So they needed that I don't know about that album in order to figure out what the next album should be. You see that with a lot of bands, but with this band, it's way more like, it's way more apparent that they really figured it out and took the lessons to heart of this album. And I'm not even saying this album's bad. I'm just saying it's not as good as Toxicity.
Yeah, it's not very cohesive, I would say. And yeah, I think like, to touch on an earlier point you were talking about of like this band getting popular does also really speak to just like the 90s and early aughts in general. Like you think of like what rock bands are big right now, they all sound the same. Like it's all exactly the same music. Like Imagine Dragons and 21 Pilots and all that shit is like any band that can sell out an arena now that's like a newer band, a newer rock band, sounds the same. There's no room for like, here's just a really weird thing. And for some reason, I don't know what it was about that era of music, but people were just like, yeah, give me the really weird. I love a really weird thing. Hook me up. I'm in. And so, yeah, I respect it for that. But we can talk more about the album specifically. We've been kind of talking about it in general terms. For me, I just was surprised. So, you famously gave me shit because when we reviewed Toxicity, I kind of said, oh, I don't think I'm as into this album as I used to be. Doesn't deny the fact that there's, 6 or 7 great songs on Toxicity. But it was just some of the kind of weirder stuff that I felt like didn't maybe hold up as well anymore. And this album, I don't remember ever loving it the whole way through, but I really forgot, like obviously Sugar and Sweet Pea and Spiders, I never lost sight of. And I always liked No, which is track 2 on the record. I remember liking that. But going into this, I was like, I don't remember if I liked this record more than Toxicity originally or where I was at on it. As I said, I was the same as you. I went back from Toxicity. Like Chop Suey came out, that blew everybody's mind. Everybody's listening to Toxicity. And then, I had that one friend who was like, no, you got to listen to their weirder early stuff. And I really don't remember how I felt about this album early on. But listening to it for this, the first 5 tracks are excellent. It goes, the first 5 tracks go Sweet Pea, and then No, and then Sugar, and then Suggestions, which I think is a great song, and then Spiders. And then for me, it really falls off a cliff. Like, I really don't feel like I need to listen to the back half of this album like ever again. And I don't even know if I hate it. I just was listening to it and I was like, oh yeah, they really hadn't figured out what they were doing yet. Like that's what really sticks out about the back half of the album for me.
I don't think I'm probably going to listen to this ever again, like in its entirety, but I think you should. It's worthwhile. It's worthwhile to listen to it. It just isn't. I don't know. It's really strange. I usually would be the guy who's like, well, I like the first album. That's the best album they made. I say that about Korn, even though people often disagree with me. And I say that about, I oftentimes will say that about Deftones, even, that I really like Adrenaline. And I maybe it's just because I heard Adrenaline before Around the Fur came out. So I was like, oh yeah, that's the best album. Like but this one, I think, again, we hated it growing up. It's really surprising that I ever got into them with like Toxicity. I think that's just because I wasn't in the neighborhood anymore. We didn't move to we moved to a trailer park, but we weren't in the neighborhood anymore. It was me, Katie, and a couple of friends of ours living in a trailer, which is crazy. Plus 2 kids. It was a lot of people for one trailer. I'll tell you that.
Yes, I remember you regaling me with stories of this trailer.
So yeah. The biggest thing about the trailer is that there were 2 TVs in the living room, and we thought it was the most amazing thing in the world. One was always on MTV or MTV2. The other one was always Dreamcast. It was always me playing on the Dreamcast. But dude, you have no idea how much we bragged about the 2 TV living room. It was crazy. And also, you know how mobile
people
homes
are probably like, well, you're living in there's 6 of you living in a trailer, and you're like, yeah, but we got 2 TVs, dude.
Yeah. And also, obviously people are gonna talk shit about this, although the P.O.D. Kast fans are fine. Yeah. The walls are like very thin, so when you're fucking and sucking, everybody in the goddamn place knows what's going on in there. You know what I mean? And that, to me, we had like we were fucking sleeping in a twin bed with a headboard, which was really weird. We just got a headboard now. But at the time, and then, they would just every morning, they'd be like, well, that headboard was going. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to fucking do? Go outside? But I do know for a fact
the headboard was hitting the wall of the trailer.
The wall with the TV on the other side of it.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was just like in my first apartment, I was living with a guy.
Wasn't your room like behind a curtain in your?
No, that was the other room because Katie had moved in. Oh, right. So we had a back room where one guy slept on one side, and then there was a tarp in between them.
Yeah. Okay.
And there was another guy sleeping on the other side of the tarp, and the guy on the one side of the tarp always had to walk through the other guy's.
Right. Yes. Okay. So, I remember that. Yeah.
It's kind of crummy for them.
You got the room because you were dating Katie, right?
And she was in that room. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there were people there all the time. There were never not people at that apartment because we were the only people with an apartment. And, you know, that's where all the drugs were. And so, like, we would just have to put a sign on our door that was like, we're having sex right now. So you may not want to walk in here, because the other weird thing about the rules in there was that you weren't allowed to smoke in the apartment except for in my bedroom.
Okay, sure.
It was nasty because there'd be 6 people in there watching TV because we could smoke in there. So
Gross.
It's nasty. No sheets on the bed, just fucking spit cups. Just, it was hell. I wish there's a picture of it.
You never put sheets on the bed?
I didn't feel like there was any reason to.
Oh my God.
And the mattress was on the floor. I didn't start putting sheets on the bed until Katie moved in.
Right. Oh.
And sometimes I just go in there.
Mattress must just be, oh man.
Nasty. It was nasty.
Yikes.
System of a Down came out when I lived in that apartment, and I think we were all just so like, fuck this, it's weird, I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? By the way, also listening to other weird music, but this had a weirder, like, I was listening to Orgy at the time, which isn't necessarily the same as Korn or Deftones. You know, listening to even Deftones at the time, which was a little bit different, a little bit more artistic. But like at the time, it's that period in your life where you are just not open-minded, where you just refuse to fucking be open-minded, where you're just like, no, I don't want my music to sound like a waltz, and I will not listen to it. I don't care how many hard riffs are in the song. Because now when I listen to it, I'm like, fuck, man, at that time with those riffs, I would have been going fucking insane for there are such heavy riffs on this album.
Yeah, it's their heaviest album by a wide margin, I would say.
It just makes you want to go fucking
how
nuts.
Heavy it was.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it, though. You know, this time listening to it, and it's just so sad about, you know, all that stuff that you miss out on when you're like 19 or 20 and you think you have everything fucking figured out and you know what you like and you're never going to change your mind. Like, I missed out on seeing System of a Down live. I always talk about also, especially now, seeing Typo Negative and just fucking hating it and heckling and booing and shit like that. And now I'm like, I have a blanket with Peter Steele's big penis in front of me, and I listen to October Rust every few weeks. So like, it's just the closed-mindedness of the time. And Typo Negative is a really good example, because I told you we hated Sugar. We hated that.
Yeah, right.
And Typo Negative had the song Black Number One. We never listened to a single other song. But when people would be like, do you like Typo Negative? We'd be like, black, 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 black. That's stupid.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
why did you say it like that?
You can write so much shit off at that age.
I know,
like, you know. Well,
I mean, walk out of a fucking. Gwen does that. She'll be 20 minutes into a movie and she'll just fucking walk out. I'm fucking out of here. I will not be. That movie Poor Things that came out.
Oh yeah.
That everybody was talking about. She's like,
Becca and I watched it. Yeah.
She's like, I'm gonna go see that. She walked out 20 minutes in and said, fuck that movie.
I could see that. It starts insanely weird. I thought for sure in the first 30 minutes, if Becca had been like, I want to turn this off, I would have been like, yeah, me too. I'm down to stop watching it. But then by the end, I quite liked it. I thought it was pretty good. But yeah, in the beginning, it is deeply, deeply weird. And you're right. That's actually a good parallel to System, to be honest, because this album gives you a lot of excuses to give up on it, I would say. Like, especially at that time when we were just stupid and you know, to be fair, there was, you know, maybe a little bit of like racism involved too, you know, not in a like I hate these guys or whatever, but just a like, oh, okay, it's like 4 Armenian guys and they're singing about politics and the music has like circus shit in it. Like, no, that's not for me.
Oh, it's some Armenian crap. Yeah, like I could definitely see myself saying something like that too. Maybe just gotta be Armenian. It's just some Armenian guy singing about being Armenian.
Yeah, have you heard that one song where in the middle it goes like doon ta ta doon ta doon ta ta doon, like these Russian guys. That's what I would have said. I wouldn't have even been like, I would have been that disrespectful probably. Like, I don't know, it's like these 4 fucking Russian guys and there's like some fucking waltz jazz circus music. I don't know. But no, I mean,
I think that's what makes them impressive to me in a way, that they did end up winning all of those people over.
Oh, big time. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's not hard to imagine, like, it's not hard to see, you know, they talk about touring this album and they played Ozfest 2 years in a row. And the first year they were on the second stage and the next year they had already made it to the main stage. It's like, it's not hard to see, you know, what people would have connected to with this music. But yeah, I just think like listening to it, you know, we're now almost 30 years past it, 26 years past it. It's very easy to go, yeah, there's some good ideas here, pardon me, and there's some really good songs, but like as a cohesive statement, you know, this album doesn't hit in that way. It's not like a wall-to-wall bangers situation at all in my mind. It's very much feels like them trying to even figure out what they want their band to be. And I think one of the articles they talked about, Darren was talking about how the first 2 songs they wrote were, I think it was either Sugar or Sweet Pea and Pluck. And those were the first 2 songs they wrote. It's like, those are wildly different songs. Like already in the beginning, they were like, it seemed like they didn't necessarily know what they wanted the band to be or to sound like. And I think that's to me, my biggest takeaway from this record is, you know, just how deeply strange it is and how it feels like they haven't figured out what System of a Down is yet. And
listen, it is really hard to win people over in that way. Like most people dig in, like, and they're like, I'm never listening. I know I dug in on a lot of stuff that I listen to now. I mean, I think I've said this, but when I was really into the band Orgy, my brother would make fun of me because I was listening to some David Bowie sounding crap.
Yep.
And I would get furious about, don't you fucking say I'm listening to David Bowie. I will not have that. You know what I mean? And then I got older and I listened to David Bowie. I was like, that guy's a fucking genius. You know?
Yeah.
It hits you at a different time in your life. But I just think like this band won people over to such an extent. I think Serge seems very likable.
Totally.
No matter what.
Very much so.
He's like a nice older man.
He's very likable.
He seems like a nice older gentleman.
Yes. 100%.
Like someone you can sit down and talk to and you might not understand what the fuck he's talking about most of the time. But also some of the other guys, that's another thing maybe that some of the other guys are like, oh, I don't know about that. Darren specifically, like if we're going to the article soon, there's some stuff he's like, I don't know about you, dude. That doesn't
never know. I mean, Darren just seems like a very classic dumb guy who thinks he is an absolute genius. That's like the biggest, for me, that's the biggest takeaway with Darren stuff is he thinks he's some prophetic genius, but then he's weird because he will appear humble sometimes and he'll kind of say things like, I don't really understand why our band is really popular. But then he says other things where you're like, oh, you're a moron, dude.
I do have to say the thing that reviewing this or reading the articles made me want more than anything is to listen to Soil, which I'm going to go looking for, even though I bet they're probably not anywhere. That's another thing about me not liking this album too at the time is it cost money to listen to it. I couldn't just have it. And we had heard Sugar and seen the video and we're just like, I'm not into it. I'm not buying that. I'm not buying what they're selling currently. And it took Chop Suey to really grab everybody. And I think that song, just when you first heard it, was like, holy shit, this is so cool. So going back and listening to this, I mean, one thing I'll say is I really like most of the big riffs in this fucking rule, man. Like they were just going so fucking, like they go heavier than any of the other new metal bands. Like at times they almost go death metal at times. Like they do it in Sugar where like that. They do the like grumbly Cookie Monster
Yes, I
stuff.
leave you.
I mean, I think that's cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Deftones do that sometimes in their early albums with like 7 words. We're like, like when it gets just soup, because I don't listen to death metal. I don't like Deicide or any of that stuff, but I like heavy stuff. And I like songs that kind of scratch that itch without them actually like being those songs, because I do still need a hook and maybe a chorus and stuff that I understand, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But I do think I don't want people to go away thinking I don't like this. I think I do like it, but I think I like it in a more, hey, this is a pretty interesting way than I do I want to listen to this all the time way.
Yeah, and I think like to me the singles are still so good. You know, Sugar, Sweet Pea, and Spiders to me all hold up. I mean, I guess Sweet Pea wasn't a single, but you know, everybody knows that song. It's a great tune, and yeah, I agree. I don't hate it either. I mean, you know, the allegations were that I hated Toxicity, which I absolutely do not hate Toxicity.
Oh, you do, but it's okay. I do have a couple of notes. Okay, one, the song "Mind."
Note me.
The song "Mind."
Yeah,
I don't like "Sexy." I don't like "Sexy Surge." And
he does say in one of the articles that like some of his lyrics were horny, and I was like, nah, I don't think so, man. I don't think anyone was listening to System of a Down and being like, let's get it on.
The sexy whisper in that song made me want to fucking throw my headphones in the sewer and just walk away forever. I was like, oh, we don't want Sexy Surge.
No,
which I'm sure he's moved past that now, but
definitely.
And I think this is to the core of how I felt about it at the time, and what makes it, what shows the closed-mindedness of me. And that is, it says, maybe I'm old, but the zany, kooky stuff just doesn't work for me anymore. I don't think I ever bought this album because the only songs I'm super familiar with are the singles and the first song, which would indicate that I was not a fan of it. Because, you know, I know Sugar, I know Sweet Pea because it's song number 1, not because it's something that I sought out and found. It was because it's the first song I heard it, and then basically was like, not interested, and like turned it off.
Well, it is like, you know, if you are going into it with, and again, it's kind of the same with Prison Song too, you know, as you talk about like the first track on an album. Like if you're kind of going into it, like let's say someone's like, yeah, this new band System of a Down, they're kind of political, they're kind of weird, you know, whatever. And then the album opens with like, you'd be like, what am I listening? Is this Tetris music? Like, what the fuck is happening? I'm out. I'm not. It would confirm a lot of biases for, I mean, obviously very quickly it gets into the like, like it gets into a good riff. But if you already had those preconceived notions, that first 10 seconds, you'd be like, no, okay, I'm out.
I also don't think that, because people listening to this, I don't think people listening to this show understand closed-minded 90s brain, which is...
They do if they are our age.
If they are our age, they understand closed-minded 90s brain. But I think it's alien to people now that are a little older that are like, man, you know, because people think things were better at earlier time. Oh, music was better then. And it really, basically, people, you would just be like, you would hear 1 minute of a song, and because it costs $15 to buy the CD, you'd be like, fuck this, I don't like this. Yeah. And you would just move on.
And you'd be pissed. And you'd be like, whatever.
And I wish I could remember, I wish I could go back and like listen to a few of the albums I just didn't buy because I was like, I'm not fucking doing this. Nope. I heard one song. I'm not fucking doing it.
They could be good. They could be really good. Yeah.
I don't like the name of the band. I'm not doing this. I don't like the name of the album.
I always like, when I grew up too, I wouldn't keep a CD wallet in my car because I had a CD wallet in my car once and it got stolen. So I had like 30 CDs get stolen or whatever. So I was like, okay, I'm not keeping a CD wallet in my car. So in my, like when I was growing up, I drove my parents' minivan and I had like a little like runner, like, not pocket, but like a little, area you could put stuff right on the driver's side and it would fit 4 CDs comfortably. And so it was very much like, you had to decide when you were leaving the house, like what 4 CDs am I taking with me for this drive to school or work or whatever. Took me an hour to get to UBC. So 4 CDs was like 1 there, 1 back, maybe 1.5 there, 1.5 back. And then, you would buy a CD. And if you listened to it once and you didn't like it, you'd be like, well, I can only take 4 CDs at a time. So this thing is not going to get into the rotation. I'm sorry. Yeah. And so, absolutely. That was a factor too. Even if you had, because I think people have a nostalgia for this era where they go, well, no, like in this era, we stuck with music, because we paid $20 for the CD. And so you would force yourself to like it because you paid $20 for it. And it was like, it was the opposite. It was like, I would be fucking angry with myself for buying it and I wouldn't listen to it out of protest to myself. Like, I would be like spiting myself. Like, John, you dumb fuck. Why did you spend $20 on this album? It fucking sucks. And then I'd throw it on, on a shelf in my bedroom and I wouldn't listen to it for a year.
Well, the other thing is that like the other side of that is I went to my friend's house and he played me this song called Sugar, and it's a guy singing in like a really stupid way. And I don't think I'm ever going to listen to that band again because I think that's what probably happened 100%. With me. I went to somebody's house. They were like, you should check this song out. And then I was just like, I ain't fucking checking that song. I don't want to hear nothing like this ever again. And then again, I listened to somebody I remember because Chop Suey is a radio hit right away. It wasn't like one of those things that the album came out and then after a while it became a radio hit. That song was a hit before the album released. 100%. So like you were so used to it, at least for me, the Blitz was playing, you were so fucking used to it that like this album's going to be a fucking insane great album, and then you ended up buying it. So that was the other thing, is like they didn't have that luxury with, and Spiders didn't. I don't even think Spiders got radio play until after Toxicity came out. I might be wrong, but
I mean, I don't remember System being. I don't remember their videos being played on Much Music until Chop Suey, and then Chop Suey got played all the time.
Yeah, that's how.
Because the video was cool too. So it got a lot of play. But I mean, you're totally right in that. In that era, you would buy a CD for one song. For sure. Like you'd hear one song and you'd love it and you'd be like, I gotta have that song. I'm gonna buy the CD. But on the same token, one song would be enough where you're like, oh, I'm not gonna spend $20 on this band. I don't like this song. Like it went both ways, right?
Oh,
like it was very much, whereas now it's like I can hear a song and I can be like, oh, I don't love this song, but I could see myself maybe liking this band. And then I go to Apple Music and I download the album and I listen to the album and I give it a chance. And I might still not like it, but it's not, one song isn't going to crush it for me. Whereas back in that era when CDs were $20, your friend could play you a song. You'd be like, oh, that band sucks. And then you would never even consider buying the CD.
Yeah. And that's what probably happened with this. So that is where I'm at with this. That's my note.